What is happening here?
There's nothing left to say right now.
Before the silence, before the tears, before the broken goodbyes, there was a dream. A dream of a family that could outlast time. A dream of unity by faith, of eternal love that could multiply instead of divide. That was the dream Kody Brown built his life around. To him, plural marriage wasn't chaos, it was divine. It was purpose. It was proof that faith could create something extraordinary. Something that went against the world's understanding of love and family. He spoke with passion and conviction. He felt that God wanted him to live differently, to lead by example, build a house where several hearts could live in harmony under one roof. And in those early years, it almost worked. Mary was his first wife and his foundation. She believed in him, his faith, his dream. Together, they were pioneers into a life that few could relate to, a love that meant sacrifice, trust, and endless endurance. Then came Janelle, practical, calm, and level-headed. She brought logic and balance, that sort of stability Kody admired. She wasn't ruled by her emotions, but by order. To Kody, she was a strategist, the partner who could keep the dream organized. Then Christine joined, full of light and laughter with faith that glowed from within. She was the heart-nurturing, devoted, the one who could turn belief into warmth. She wanted to love everyone equally, to be the glue holding it all together. And years later, the missing piece of the puzzle appeared, Robin. Her arrival felt like that of renewal to him. She brought in energy, vulnerability, and spirituality that Kody felt he was missing. To him, she wasn't another wife. She reminded him why he did all this in the first place. Each woman came with her own hope, her own version of love. Together they became something rare, a family built on the belief that love wasn't limited and faith could make room for more. It was beautiful in the beginning. The children filled the home with laughter. The wives worked side by side, raising one another's children, praying together, cooking together, trying to build something eternal. Kody would often stand at the center of it all, the laughter, the noise, the chaos, and feel proud. He thought, this is it. This is what faith can do. He envisioned himself not only as a husband, but more as a leader, a patriarch chosen to live in a different fashion compared to a world that would never understand him. And for a while, the wives believed that too. There were moments of real harmony. Birthday parties where everyone laughed like one family, Sunday dinners when they held hands in prayer, nights spent telling stories about eternity. They weren't just wives, but sisters in faith, all trying to build a life they felt God wanted for them. But even in those bright years, shadows lingered quietly in the corners. Unspoken doubts, private tears, small comparisons that grew into questions. Because sharing a husband, no matter how faithful the heart, always came with pain. Christine once said, "You have to learn how to love through heartbreak in plural marriage." She was right. Even while the dream was living, cracks were forming beneath it. Still, they persevered. They reassured themselves that with faith, love would blossom. God would not test them beyond what they could endure. Kody believed it most of all. He thought his leadership could guide them through anything. He told himself that as long as he kept the vision alive, they would follow, and they would find joy. He was confident, at times overly so. He didn't see the exhaustion building behind Mary's eyes or the distance forming in Janelle's quiet heart, the ache that Christine tried so hard to mask with her smile. And he couldn't have known what Robin's arrival would truly mean for the rest. Because each addition changes the balance. For every dream, no matter how holy, carries a price with it. But in those early years, the Browns didn't see cost-only purpose. They felt they were somewhat different. They believed that love, multiplied by faith, could overcome anything. When they moved together into one home, it felt like a symbol, one family under one roof. Under one God, they thought that if they could pull this off, they would be showing that plural marriage was not chaos, but, in fact, divine order. Neighbors judged them. Society rejected them. But together they were unshakable. At least that's what they told themselves. Behind the scenes, though, unity started to feel like pressure. Every smile had to be shared. Every emotion had to be managed. And every disagreement, every little piece of pain, had to be swallowed to protect the dream. The wives rarely spoke their full truth. They wouldn't want to be seen as jealous or weak, and so they quietly carried their doubts with them, trusting that Kody's faith would somehow make it all right. He did not realize how heavy that silence was. He had thought that patience was proof of peace. He believed their silence meant everything was fine. But that wasn't okay. It was fragile. And though no one saw it coming, the dream that once made them special would soon become the very thing that tore them apart. The cameras would capture the smiles, the prayers, the public faith. But what the cameras couldn't see were the cracks, the long nights, the broken promises, the quiet prayers whispered in pain. Kody had wanted to show the world a family united in faith. Yet, in time, it was that very faith that became the wall between them, a belief so strong, shutting his eyes to the reality that had grown right in front of him. They were not one family anymore. They were 4 hearts, each breaking in silence one by one. Though no one had said it aloud, each of the wives had started to wonder the same thing. What happens when forever hurts? Because forever, they were realizing, might not be what God had intended after all. And soon, the dream which started off as heaven would start to feel like a cage. This was the beginning, not of faith but of fracture. The first whispers of an ending that no one wanted to believe was near. The day the sister wives' family fell apart didn't start with shouting. It started here, with a dream that was too heavy to carry any longer. Change doesn't come with fanfare. It slips in unannounced, in the smallest of moments. The held gaze that lingers a touch too long, the prayer said with feeling a little forced, the silence stretched a fraction too long over dinner. For the Brown family, that quiet shift began long before anyone noticed. At first it was easy to explain away. Everyone was busy. There were children to raise, bills to pay, moves to plan. Each wife had her own world to manage, her own rhythm. What they didn't realize was that the rhythm was no longer in sync. Kody's dream had begun as shared faith and shared purpose, but it was slowly beginning to sound like shared obligation. Mary, who once had been so confident that she was the first wife, felt herself becoming invisible. She smiled still, supported still, played her part still, but something in her had dimmed. Where laughter used to come, there were now extended pauses. She was there, yet no longer connected. Janelle, the steady one, buried herself in practicality. She focused on the children, the finances, the logistics of keeping so many lives running. She didn't lose any love for her family, but her energy had changed from connecting to managing. She was no longer living the dream. She was maintaining it. Christine, the light of the home, tried hardest to hold on. She believed if she loved enough, gave enough, smiled enough, the tension would fade. But each time Kody's attention turned elsewhere, her heart cracked a little more. And then came Robin. She was supposed to come into the family to strengthen it, bringing in fresh life and vigor into its circle. Instead, she threw everything off balance. Kody glowed around her. His tone softened. His patience returned. He became the version of himself the other wives hadn't seen in years. At first, they had told themselves it was the excitement of something new. They wanted to believe that Robin's presence was good for him, good for them. But the longer it went on, the harder it became to ignore what was happening. He was spending more time with her. When she was around, he laughed more. He defended her when the others questioned his choices. And slowly, the bond that once held all the wives together started to divide. Christine felt it first. She saw how Kody's eyes lit up when Robin entered a room, how his tone shifted when he spoke to her. It wasn't just affection, it was favoritism. Mary tried to convince herself she was above jealousy. After all, she had lived through this before. But deep down, she knew something was different this time. Robin wasn't just another wife. She was the one Kody seemed to protect. Janelle stayed neutral, at least on the surface, saying it was none of her concern. But even she could feel it. Everything in the family dynamic was shifting, and no one knew how to stop it. The conversations grew tense. Uncomplicated discussions over chores, kids, or money now evolved into subtle battles for fairness. No longer did the wives view each other as sisters in faith. Rather, they saw one another as rivals for the same now fading attention. And Kody? He didn't see it that way, not at all. In his mind, he was still leading, still doing what was right. He believed his wives' frustrations were a test of faith, a sign that they needed to be stronger, not that he needed to change. When one wife cried, he prayed. When another questioned him, he preached. He didn't see that his leadership had turned into distance. He was trying to hold a family together through rules instead of love. The wives started to live separate emotional lives. Meals were quieter now. Conversations more formal. The laughter that once filled the kitchen now came only from one corner of the house, usually wherever Robin and Kody were talking. The other wives felt it, a wall slowly rising between them and their husband. Kody said to himself that love was still there, but love without presence is just memory. He was still in the family, but he wasn't with the family. Christine started to question her worth. Was she not faithful enough? Not kind enough? Not beautiful enough? She started to perceive her marriage not as a union based on love, but on work. Every moment was effort to be noticed, to be respected, to simply exist in the same space where she once felt loved. Janelle was tired. She grew more independent, not because she wanted to pull away, but because she had to. When emotional intimacy disappeared, practicality became her refuge. She stopped waiting for Kody's attention and started focusing on her own stability. Mary's silence deepened. The year's patience had been a trust in itself that love can be rekindled through endurance. But now, even endurance felt isolating. Even Robin started feeling the strain. She didn't want to be the source of the division, but every time she attempted to get closer to the others, it just made things worse. The cracks were no longer invisible. Kody started talking more about leadership, about obedience, about unity through structure. But the more he talked, the more disconnected the family got. He couldn't see that his faith was starting to sound like control. His wives didn't need a preacher, they needed a partner. They needed love, not lessons. Time, not rules. Understanding, not demands. But by now the shift was complete. A family that once sat around one table was now living in emotional pieces. Each wife carrying her own weight, her own wounds, her own quiet heartbreak. They still smiled for the cameras, still said the words that kept the image alive, but were no longer concealing the truth. Christine would lie in bed each night, a stranger in her own marriage. Janelle would wake up and wonder if this was what faith was supposed to feel like. Lonely. Mary would pray for connection that never came. Robin would cry in her room, unsure why something that felt so right had brought so much pain. And Kody? He was still convinced he was on the right track. He could not see that leadership without love is only distance dressed up as duty. He didn't know it yet, but the foundation had already cracked beyond repair. The family wasn't falling apart suddenly, it was unraveling, one quiet moment at a time. A dream starting with faith, now shook to its core by pride. And even though nobody said it out loud, each wife was beginning to realize what their hearts had been whispering for years. Sometimes the thing that was supposed to bring you closer to God ends up pushing you further from each other. And that truth was about to change everything. Every family has that one moment which changes everything. A conversation. A confession. A silence that could not be overweighted. For the Browns, that moment began not with anger, but with exhaustion. Christine was at her wit's end. Years of holding on, smiling through disappointment, and pretending the pain was just a phase finally broke her spirit. She had tried to be the perfect wife, to be the loyal believer, the devoted mother. But none of it was enough. It was a quiet night, the night that changed everything. She and Kody were working on something simple, a door, a project, a task that was supposed to be ordinary. But beneath every word, every movement, there was tension. Christine could feel it. She felt that they weren't just building something. They were covering up what had already been broken. Her question, the one she had been afraid to ask for so many years, finally came, and the truth fell like a stone. "Are we ever going to be intimate again?" she said. Kody paused, then shrugged. That shrug said more than words ever could. He told her he wasn't interested in an intimate marriage anymore. That people live in marriages without romance or closeness, and they make it work. He spoke as if detachment were maturity, as if numbness were faith. Christine sat there stunned. For her, intimacy wasn't about lust or ego. It was about connection. It was the heartbeat of marriage, the sign that love still existed beneath the struggle. But now that heartbeat was gone. She realized she had fought for years for something that wasn't there anymore, maybe something that never really was. At that moment, she felt heartbroken but clear. Heartbreak, because the man she once loved no longer looked at her with warmth. Clarity. She realized finally that to stay was to lose herself. She woke up the next morning to silence. Mumbling very little, Kody made breakfast. And when he left, she knew what it meant. It was over. But ending a marriage in plural life isn't so simple. There are children, there's faith, there's community, and there's the unspoken rule that walking away means walking away from everything. Still, Christine couldn't pretend anymore. The love had died. The faith had faded. The only thing that remained was truth. As days passed, she started packing quietly. Boxes filled with her memories, clothes, books, small reminders of a life she had built with devotion. Each was a story, a moment she once believed in. Now each one felt like a weight being lifted. When Kody saw the boxes, he acted surprised, almost confused. He said, "I didn't think you were serious." But Christine wasn't bluffing. She was done being invisible. She looked right in his eyes and uttered words held inside her for years. "I just don't want to stay in a marriage that has no love. I'm ready to be free." Kody tried to reason with her for a moment. He said things could change. He told her she should focus on being a better sister wife. He blamed her behavior, her attitude, her disrespect. But Christine had heard it all before. She realized that whenever she tried to talk about her feelings with him, he always turned it into a lecture. Every time she asked for connection, he gave her rules. Every time she needed love, he gave her logic. This time she didn't argue. She didn't cry. She said nothing, just nodded and continued packing. Because she wasn't leaving in anger, she was leaving in peace. When she told the other wives, the reaction was mixed. Janelle comprehended. She had seen Christine's pain and knew it was only a matter of time. Mary wasn't, though hurt, surprised. She knew what it felt like to live unloved and unchosen. And Robin wept. She said she did not wish for the family to break up and believed they can mend it. But Christine knew better. This wasn't something that could be fixed. You can't rebuild a home when its foundation has already crumbled. When Kody finally came to move his things, he stood in silence, watching as she sealed the last box. He tried to tell himself it was just another argument, that she would change her mind. Yet deep inside, he knew it. This time she wasn't coming back. He looked around the room that had once been theirs, where the laughter, shared dreams, and faith that once filled it were now all gone. What was left was space. Christine didn't gloat or rage. She simply said goodbye. Her voice was calm, her face steady. She wasn't running away out of rebellion. She was leaving because she was finally choosing herself. And for the first time in years, she could breathe. But to Kody, it came as a shock that was unbearable. He wasn't used to not being in control. He wasn't used to someone saying no. "It feels like a game, but it might not be," he said to cameras. He tried to laugh it off, tried to stay strong, but he was unraveling inside. Because for the first time, one of his wives wasn't asking for his permission. She was taking her life back. Over the next few days, Christine felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. She had constructed this life on faith, on obedience, on the notion that to love was to sacrifice. But now she was learning that real love isn't about endurance. It's about freedom. Kody, meanwhile, retreated into anger. He told himself she had betrayed the family. He convinced himself that her leaving was selfish. Still, deep down, he knew that it was his indifference that drove her away. The breaking point wasn't about one night or one argument. It was years of not being heard, not being seen, not being loved. Christine didn't leave to destroy the family. She left because the family had already destroyed her. And as she closed the door behind her for the last time, she whispered a quiet prayer. Not for the marriage she lost, but for the peace she was finally finding. That was the day the family really began to fall apart. Because once one heart walks away, the rest are forced to face the truth they've been avoiding. Forever doesn't always mean together. And sometimes letting go is the only way to save what's left of yourself. Everything was different after Christine had gone. The house was quieter, much emptier. The very air felt heavy. Laughter of children that once rang in the hallways was taken over by the type of silence that hurts to hear. The Browns had built their sense of identity on togetherness, on being a family that could survive judgment and distance and misunderstanding, but it was a puzzle that felt incomplete with only one missing piece. Kody acted as if everything was okay. He told cameras he wasn't surprised, that Christine had been unhappy for years. He said he had seen it coming, that he was done chasing. Yet behind his bravado, there was anger, the kind that hides beneath control. He felt betrayed, exposed. For so long, he had believed he was the one holding the family together. Now, one decision from one wife had proved that everything he built could crumble overnight. He blamed Christine. He said she had given up. He said she wasn't loyal. She wasn't a good sister wife. The actual situation, however, was more complex. Christine hadn't left just him. She had left the system that broke her spirit. She had left the unspoken hierarchy, the exhaustion, the constant competition for affection. She saw it as clear as day. She knew Christine's pain because she had lived it sleepless nights waiting for a husband who never came, the feeling of being a background character in her own marriage. Still, unlike Christine, she kept silent, trying to hold things together for stability's sake. Mary, though, was in her own way, shattered. She had clung to this hope for years, believing that love would be restored, her loyalty amounting to something. But now, watching Christine walk away, she came to a painful realization. Loyalty without love is just loneliness in disguise. Robin was caught in the middle. She did not want Christine to leave. She cried and begged and reasoned that they could fix it. She said she'd always wanted a family, not division. But the more she spoke, the more the others saw her as the problem, the symbol of imbalance, the reminder of everything that had gone wrong. For the first time, Kody's world was no longer centered around harmony. It was chaos. He started talking more about rules, about obedience, about how his wives needed to be loyal. He said he was tired of being disrespected, tired of being blamed. But in his frustration, he failed to see that what they wanted wasn't control. It was connection. The other wives were walking on eggshells. Conversations became cautious. Every word could start an argument. Janelle, always rational, started to pull away. Her independence got stronger. She had built her life around raising children, managing finances, and staying out of drama. But with Christine gone, she felt the absence of her closest ally. The balance she once helped keep was gone. Mary felt isolated. She and Kody barely spoke when they did. The words sounded rehearsed, empty. She had spent so many years hoping for a spark to return. But now, there wasn't even a flame left to tend. And Robin, once the object of Kody's affection, found herself bearing the stress of being the last wife standing. A privilege that once was now felt like punishment. Kody, feeling frustrated, began to become defensive. He lamented that the family was collapsing because the women had lost their faith. He felt they were no longer loyal to the principle, that they were turning away from the calling that made them different. But they were not losing faith in God. They were losing faith in him. Christine's departure had exposed the truth they had all been avoiding. That love cannot be shared through hierarchy, that family cannot survive on control, that faith without compassion becomes cruelty. The wives had carried the emotional weight of the family for years, while Kody carried the pride. Now that pride was cracking, he started demanding loyalty that could no longer be given. He accused his wives of betrayal, but they viewed his pain as one that was self-inflicted. Every argument became a sermon, and every tear was proof that they were disrespecting him. The more he spoke, the less they listened. The more he required obedience, the more distance he created. For Janelle, it was the beginning of the end. She'd spent her entire adult life believing in the dream of unity. But Christine's courage gave her something she hadn't had in years: permission to think about herself. She started questioning her place. Why was she still here? What was she still fighting for? The answers weren't comforting. Mary withdrew into silence. The emotional distance between her and Kody had become permanent. When she tried to reach out, he rebuffed her with polite indifference. He even admitted, "I don't see us ever being intimate again." It was that sentence, cold and final and unflinching, that Mary finally stopped waiting. To Robin, the guilt was unbearable. She would try to fix things, to pull everyone together, but every attempt reminded them of what they had lost. She wanted peace, but peace can't exist when love has already left the room. They stopped gathering as they used to. No more shared dinners, no more family meetings that didn't end in tension. Even the children felt the change. The house that once seemed to overflow with love now bore the burden of unspoken disappointment. Kody began to withdraw socially. He spent more and more time alone, angry with the world, angry with the cameras, angry with wives who wouldn't follow him anymore. He increasingly appeared as a man defending an idea rather than leading a family. When asked if he thought the family could survive, his response was bitter. "Not unless they all start respecting me again." But respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. And what Kody couldn't see was that his leadership had turned into loneliness. The wives weren't disloyal. They were just done suffering. Each, in his own quiet way, had reached the same conclusion. They couldn't fix something that was never equal to begin with. The fallout wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, inevitable. The kind of ending that doesn't explode, but fades. The kind of ending you don't see coming, not until you realize you've been living in it. Kody was right about one thing. The family was falling apart. But it wasn't an act of rebellion. It was due to exhaustion. Faith can build a family, but without love, even the strongest foundation will crack. The Browns weren't losing faith. They were learning what it really meant, and that realization was about to change their lives forever. It was in those moments of silence that the Brown family began to come to grips with their respective realities. There were no more family meetings, no more joint dinners, no more pretending that all was well. The dream that once united them finally dissolved, not in a fight, but in exhaustion. And amidst the ruin, there remained 4 women, 1 man, and a legacy cemented in faith and heartbreak. For Christine, leaving wasn't about escape, it was about rediscovery. She woke up in peace for the first time in decades. No competition, no waiting for affection that never came, no need to prove her worth. Her days were filled with new laughter, new love, and a sense of freedom she hadn't known since she was young. She once thought that the purpose of her life was to serve a marriage that was based on common faith. Now she knew faith without joy was not divine, but captivity. Her decision to leave had set off a chain reaction. It gave the other wives permission to feel what they had long buried. Janelle was next. She had always been practical, calm, the one who found solutions. But the more she tried to make things work, the more she realized she was the only one still trying. Kody had grown distant, impatient, angry at her independence. He wanted obedience. She wanted respect. One day, she simply stopped fighting. She told him she needed space, and this time, she meant it. She wasn't walking away in rebellion. She was walking toward peace. She began to focus on her own life, her children, her health, her happiness. And in doing so, she realized that letting go wasn't losing. It was healing. Mary watched it all from a distance. She had spent years in emotional limbo, technically married but alone in every way that counted. Kody had already admitted he had no interest in a relationship with her. Those words had broken something inside her, but they had also freed her. One morning, Mary woke up and realized she wasn't sad anymore. She wasn't waiting. She wasn't hoping. She was done. She finally understood that love cannot exist without reciprocation. And she made the quiet decision to move forward, not with anger, but with grace. And then there was Robin, the last wife standing. He was the one who, until the very end, believed the family could be saved. But even she could no longer refute the fact. She was living in a home full of silence, surrounded by the ghosts of a family that no longer existed. The man she had married was no longer the man she knew. He was bitter, resentful, weighed down by regret. Robin had wanted a big family, sisterhood, faith shared in unity. Instead, she got isolation. She remained holding the dream everyone else had long given up on. She would cry often, not because she was guilty, but because she missed the love that once was. She missed the laughter, the shared meals, the chaos that once felt holy. Now all of it was gone. And Kody was finally alone. He had begun this journey confidently, a man chosen by God to lead a family of faith. He believed that he could guide, protect, and love multiple women through divine purpose. But all that had now been reduced to dust. For the first time, there were no wives to defend him, no family to hide behind, no faith to justify his choices. There was only Kody, a man forced to face himself. He replayed every conversation, every argument, every moment when he could have chosen kindness, but instead chose control. He thought about the shrug, the silence, the words he couldn't take back. He told himself he had tried his best, but deep down he knew he hadn't listened. He had confused leadership with pride, faith with authority, and love with loyalty. Now, a man who had grown up believing that he was intended for greatness was just another soul learning humility the hard way. He continued to visit his children, to speak of faith, and to attempt an explanation of what had happened. But something had changed in him. The fire of certainty was gone. In its place was something quieter, regret. The wives, now separated, were finding their own forms of peace. Christine found love again, not just with someone new, but with herself. She recorded independence, proving she could do well without anyone's permission. Mary found forgiveness, but not for Kody, for herself. And Robin, though heartbroken, clung to her faith, even if she didn't know what it meant anymore. Each woman had walked a long, painful road, but they were walking now toward light. Because sometimes the most spiritual act isn't staying, it's leaving. For years, the Browns believed their story to be about faith and unity, but in reality, it was about growth and truth. They had tried to prove to the world that love could be shared, that plural marriage could work. And maybe, for a while, it did. Love built on sacrifice instead of respect will always crumble. The family didn't fail because of hate. It failed because everyone stopped feeling seen. It failed because one man forgot that love cannot be led like an army. It must be nurtured like a garden. In the end, the sister wives' family didn't collapse overnight. It fell apart piece by piece, through silence, through pride, through years of pretending that endurance was the same as happiness. But maybe this was how it was always meant to end. Maybe forever doesn't mean staying no matter what. Maybe it means learning when to walk away with your head held high. There they all were, Kody, Christine, Janelle, Mary, and Robin, all with their own truths to come to. And those truths didn't destroy them. They set them free. Because the end of forever isn't the end of love. It is the beginning of self-worth. It's the beginning of peace. And for the Browns, that's what this story truly became. Not a tragedy, but a transformation. The day that the sister wives' family fell apart wasn't the end of their story. It was the day they stopped surviving and finally started living.